Welcome back. On the Do Now today, I wanted you to think about it in a democracy where people are allowed to vote. Should we always make decisions based on the majority rule? Meaning the group with the most votes should always get their way. And as you sort of reflect on that, is that the best way for deciding things? We're going to do an activity as a class to talk about this majority rule. You're going to be split into two groups. You're either going to be part of Group A or Group B. And then we're going to hold an election. All right, so I'll come around. I'll divide you. I'll tell you what group you're going to be part of. Then we'll put up a question and we'll vote on what should happen. So, your first question, which group should I give candy to? Should I give it to Group A or B? Next, which group should have homework tonight? Group A or Group B? Next, which group should not be allowed to vote anymore? Group A or Group B? Our last question, which group should I give extra credit to? Group A or Group B? Hopefully through this exercise, you realize that majority rule might be a good way to decide things, but it can also be a pretty bad way to decide things. Right? If we're deciding who gets things, who wins, how should we do stuff, well, sometimes the majority looks out for themselves and they hurt the smaller group, the minority. And this has happened several times in American history with really negative effects. So this is one of the fears of democracy is, letting people vote, letting people choose. But once people start putting themselves into groups, how quickly do they start taking away rights and freedoms from smaller groups? So today we're going to be looking at voting, how we vote, specifically for the president, how we decide who the president is. So first, we go through something called the primaries, which is what we're doing right now, right? In November, where we're going to pick our next president. Right now, we're doing what we call the primaries, which are like the semifinals. Right? So the Democrats have to decide who their one person's going to be. Republicans have to decide who theirs are. And there is no one election day to do this. It's spread out through several months. And it goes by state. So each state kind of takes a turn. They vote, they decide, and then another state. And ultimately, we get to the point where either the Democrats have their person, Republicans have their person, and they're ready for the actual election. We'll talk more about the primaries later in this trimester, but it's essentially the semifinals. The finals are what we call the general election. This is what happens in November. And we're going to vote on a lot of things, but the biggest thing we're probably going to be voting on is the president. And last time it was Trump versus Biden. It looks like it's going to be Trump and Biden again this year as the main two candidates running for office. And we call that the general election. That's going to be early in November. Now, when we decide who the president is, there's a couple ways to count these votes. There's one way, which is called the popular vote, where I could just add up all the votes for Trump, all the votes for Biden, and whoever gets the most wins. That's not how we pick the president. That's how we pick a lot of things in this country, but not the president. And the reason why, there's lots of reasons, but that exercise we just did, when I split you into two groups, that's one of the reasons why. There's this fear that the bigger states with the more people would do whatever they want and they would override the voice of the smaller group and start to oppress and take away their rights and freedoms. So when they wrote the Constitution, they came up with something called the Electoral College, and that's how we decide the president. Now we use the Electoral College to decide who the president is. Each state is given a number of votes. We call them electoral votes based on their population. So the minimum you can have is 3. That's the smallest number. So a state like Wyoming doesn't have very many people. They get 3 votes. States like California, which have a lot of people, have like 55 votes. All right, so the more people you have, the more votes you have. This creates what we call a winner take all situation. So in Colorado, if Biden gets 51% of the vote and Trump gets 49, well, Biden gets all of our votes. Even though it was really close, he's going to get them all. If he won 75% of the vote and Trump won 25, he still gets the same amount of votes, electoral votes. All right, so it's a winner take all. Winning the presidency is not about getting the most votes, it's about winning the states. Some states are worth more than others. Um, but it's kind of like if we think about sports, if we're thinking about basketball, we don't look at how many points a team scored all season, we look at how many games they won. That's kind of like the Electoral College. We don't count the total amount of votes you get, we count how many states you won. And that's how we decide the president. Here's how the electoral votes are broken down. Here's Colorado with 9 electoral votes. Here's Wyoming with 3. Here's Texas with 55. Or sorry, Texas with 38. California with 55. So the more people, the more votes. If you want to become president, you have to win 270 of these. So some states are worth more, some states are worth less. But the goal is to collect as many states as possible to get all those electoral votes. Here's how the last election broke down. You can see Biden won more than 270, which means he won. The blue are the states that went for Biden. Red are the states that went for Trump. There's another way of looking at it, kind of weird, where you stretch a state based on how many people it has. So California appears to look bigger. Wyoming's made to look smaller. Just another way of seeing it. You could also do something like this, where states are broken down by boxes. Each box represents how many electoral votes they get. So you can see California is much bigger than like Wyoming. And here's another way of looking at it, right? That we can kind of manipulate the map to make it show how Biden won because he got more states. You do get weird things that happen sometimes, like in 2016. If you remember that long ago, it was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And if you look at the electoral votes, you can see Trump won. He got more than 270 votes. He got 304. Clinton only got 227. The weird thing is, Clinton actually got more votes than Trump. Right? So the states where she won big. The states where Trump won, it was close. The end result is more votes, but Trump won more states. Right? Kind of like that sports analogy. Clinton scored more points throughout the season, but Trump won more games. This brings up a lot of questions about should we elect president by electoral vote or popular vote? Which one's more important? A lot of people say popular gives the most amount of people what they want, a better representation of voice. Other people say electoral college protects the smaller voices from being abused, and that each area of the country gets its say. We're going to watch a video as a class that'll talk about the electoral college. Today you're going to be doing a reading about the electoral college, and then answering questions based on different levels. Remember, level 1 is it right or wrong? Just give me the right answer. Level 2, more complex, give me a little bit more in depth, a couple sentences. Level 3, that's where we're answering, giving our reasons, giving evidence, and then explaining why it's important. Let me know if you need help.